Right, hello ladies and gents, welcome to another repair video. Today we're going to be working on this Nintendo Switch which has been sent in. And this particular Switch has been sent in because it's not charging. So the customer got in touch by email and asked me if I could take a look. So I've had it sent in and we're going to see what we can do about getting this working. So the first thing I'm going to attempt to do is turn it on and just see if it comes up with any kind of logo. And apparently not, so completely no power at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hook up the USB ammeter and just see if we can get a reading and see if we can figure out roughly what's going on with it based on what the ammeter is reading. So I've got the ammeter there, you can see it's got 4.88 volts and 0 amps. So let's plug in the charger. Okay. Well, straight away there's no charging port. The charging port is completely obliterated. So yeah, that's not going to charge, is it? So the first thing we're going to need to do is take it apart, take the board out and install a new charger port before I can do anything at all. I didn't actually notice that to start with. I should have inspected it beforehand. Makes you look a little bit silly, but never mind. But while I do have your attention, if you like me looking silly, then please hit that subscribe button there below and turn on the bell notification so that you don't miss any future videos. Okay, let's take a look. Okay, so it looks nice and clean. So I'm going to remove the motherboard and then we'll see what we're dealing with. And motherboard is now out of the chassis, so we're just about ready to start inspecting. So I'm going to clean off the old thermal paste there just to prevent it from going all over my fingers. There we go. And just wipe that down. Good. Right, so first thing I need to do then is remove the USB-C port, and the way I'm going to do that is by using hot air on its own. And I'm going to pop it under the microscope so I can give you a closer look at what we're going to do, and I'll walk you through the process. Alright, so we've got the USB-C port here, and what I'm going to do is just heat up the area with hot air from above the board. So from the top of the board, just heat up the area with hot air, and I'm going to wait until the solder melts, and then what I'll do is once I feel like the solder's melted, I'll give it a nudge. If it moves freely, then I'll give it another 10 seconds before lifting the port off completely. So I'm just going to hover the hot air over, and I'm using 480 degrees Celsius at 40% airflow. And the reason for such a high temperature is to make sure that it melts the pins underneath as well. When I reinstall the port, I'll be using 440 degrees, but I'm not bothered if I damage this port because it's damaged anyway. Okay, and the solder is starting to melt, so I'm going to give it another 10 seconds. And lift off the port, and as you can see, we've got absolutely no damage whatsoever to the port itself. Okay, and I can't see any bridges on the pins, which is absolutely great. Right, so what I'm going to do now then is just do a little bit of testing around this power management IC area and just see if we've got any kind of shorts and make sure that the chips are good. Chances are we could have some damage to the chip itself because the USB port was damaged, and we usually do get collateral damage, but we'll see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop the multimeter into continuity mode. So continuity mode is the mode that's going to beep when we complete the circuit, and I'm going to pop one probe on ground. In this case I'm going to use the ground shield just here, and I'm just going to test these caps and make sure we don't have a short to ground. And we do have a short to ground. We have a short to ground on this capacitor just here. This capacitor is linked directly to P13 USB, which is on the back of the board. P13 USB, we can clearly see there's a hole in there, so that is definitely damaged. So if you look in the middle of the chip, we can see we've got a hole just here. So that is definitely going to need to be replaced. But what I need to do is, first of all, I'm going to confirm that the short is in this area. So I'm going to pop one probe on ground again. And as you can hear, we get a beep on both sides of that capacitor, which means that the capacitor itself is shorted out to ground. We can very visibly see the damage there on P13, so there's definitely damage there. But what I do need to do is remove the P13 USB chip and make sure that the short is gone when we actually remove the chip. Because if the short isn't gone, then it's going to be a short on the CPU. So we always check that first and make sure that the CPU isn't shorted before proceeding with any of the actual repairs. So once again, I've got my hot air set to 480 degrees Celsius at 40% airflow, and I'm just going to get this chip removed. So now let's use the multimeter again and just check if that short is gone. So we'll use this middle pad now because that's a ground point as well. And the short is gone. So we should be good to just replace that chip, and it should hopefully be good to go. If we flip the board around now and we test this capacitor here again, and as we can see, the short is gone. Good, that's absolutely brilliant. So I've got a brand new P13 USB there. And just make sure it's in the right orientation. Pin number 1 is top right. I'm going to get that roughly in place. I'm going to drop my hot air down to 440 degrees, and I'm going to get this chip tacked down into place first of all before I add some flux. I'll just use a little bit of hot air there just to basically stick it down in place, and then I'll add flux afterwards. Now I'm going to let the chip flow itself into place. There we go. Press and hold. Perfect. Get a touch more flux there. And there we go. So just touch up that one pin there, and you're probably wondering now why I didn't replace the solder, and that's because it's absolutely unnecessary to replace the solder there. There's nothing wrong with the solder that was on there, so rather than risk knocking components, we just use the lead-free solder that's already on there. Just going to clean off that flux. Perfect. Okay, so before I actually go ahead and put a new port on, what I want to do is just make 100% sure that the filters here are good. It's going to be a little bit difficult because at the moment my probe is damaged, but I'm going to make sure anyway. Excellent. So filters are absolutely fine. Okay, so all we need to do now is just get a new port installed. So before we actually get a port installed, I need to just clean up this area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace the solder that's on the pins themselves with some fresh leaded solder. And the reason I'm replacing the solder here and not on the chip is because we want to make sure that we've got a nice even amount of solder on all of the pins to make sure that we get a full contact when we replace the port. Because when we replace the port, we can't see underneath the port, which means we can't actually tell if the port itself is soldered correctly, because we can't access those bottom pins. So by making sure that we've got a nice even amount of solder on the pins, it's going to make sure that we know, it's going to make sure that we've got as much chance as possible to actually get the port installed successfully. So all I'm going to do is just put some solder onto the tip of the iron, and I'm going to run the soldering iron across in a circular motion very, very gently. There we go. And then I'm going to replace the solder that's on these ground legs. There we go. Alright, so now I'm going to flip the board around. And I'm going to replace the solder on the ground legs from this side as well. There we go. Right, so the final thing to do is just wick away the solder that's on the ground legs, and I'm going to do that from the back of the port if I can. Sometimes I have to do it from the front as well, but most of the time I can just get away with doing it from the back. And the reason for that is because I don't really want to risk damaging the pads on the other side by wicking away near them. So if I can avoid it, I'm going to basically just wick away from this side and try and clean out the holes. That's going to make it a lot easier to install a new port because there's going to be no ground legs to warm up. Okay, let's just clean up. Okie doke. And we're pretty much good to go there. So there is a little bit of solder there still, so I'm going to try and clean that up before I install a new port. There we go. And let's just inspect these pads. Absolutely fine. Excellent. Okay. So I'm going to get a new port installed now. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to remove the nozzle from the hot air gun again. And I'm going to use 440 degrees at 40% airflow. And I'm going to install this port by warming up the area first. Trying to get the solder molten before I drop the port in place. And that's going to give me as best of a chance as possible of installing the port without melting it. Because we don't want to melt the port while we're installing it. So I'm going to hold the port in the tweezers like this, and I'm going to use hot air. And I'll add some flux first. Forgot to do that there. And let's drop the port in place. So let's press and hold on the port for a minute. And I'm going to increase my airflow to 60%. Add some more flux. And I'm going to reflow it once more. Press and hold. And let go. Okay, let's inspect that. That definitely looks flat to the board. Pins look good. Okay. So finally I'm going to add some flux, and I'm just going to reflow these back pins using the soldering iron. Just to make 100% sure that we've got enough solder on them. But they look perfectly flat to the board, so it should be absolutely fine. Okay. So I'm just going to clean up the board now. Just get rid of the flux so I can take a look. Okay, let's dry that off. and that looks absolutely fine. It's a couple of millimeters out, but all of those pins have soldered absolutely perfectly, so it should be fine. Should be absolutely perfect. A couple of millimeters isn't going to make much of a difference in terms of whether or not it's going to charge. So what I'm going to do before I go ahead and put this back together is just test this fuse. And that fuse is good. Let's test this coil. The coil is good. And let's just test the capacitors around BQ24193. That's the battery management IC for the Nintendo Switch. Good. Okay, so everything else is testing fine. That's absolutely brilliant. Right, so all that's left to do then is just to solder these ground legs on the back. Make sure that they're secure and that the port's not going to snap. So just add a bit of flux to those 4 points. And there we go. Beautiful. Right, okay, so let's just move a couple of things out of the way here, and then I'm just going to clean up this port again. And also inside the port as well. And let's get ready to test. So I'm just going to clean off the flux that's on the bench here. Just get rid of that. And let's test, shall we? So I'm going to take the chassis and I'm going to install essential items only. So that's going to be the LCD, the backlight and the battery. Hopefully we get a symbol on the screen that tells us it's charging. And we do. Yes. 0.42 amps, that's absolutely perfect. Okay, let's get this back together. So what I'm going to need to do is hook this up to the 15 volt charger just to give it some time to charge, because I don't know how long this has actually been turned off for. So I'm going to need to hook it up to the 15 volt charger just to make sure that, one, it takes a charge from 15 volt, and two, to charge the battery up enough to be able to turn it on and test it. So that is great news. That means that this console should be working. I'm not going to say it is, but it should be working. Shouldn't have any more issues. So I'm just going to get all of these ribbon cables rerouted now. I'll get the board installed. I won't put the back covers on because we never know. We might need to take it back apart for some reason. We can never predict whether we've got to take it back apart for any reason or not. It could have a fault that we don't know about, so we'll just basically put it back together enough so as we can install it into the dock and test the docking functionality, just to make sure before we put the back on and waste even more time. As you can see, the port does indeed fit perfectly. Like I said, 1 or 2 millimeters isn't going to make a difference, or at least it shouldn't do. So what we need to do now is just basically make sure that it turns on. So make sure it charges and turns on, and also we need to make sure that it docks as well. So Because we've installed a new port and P13 USB, which is the video management IC for the Nintendo Switch, or rather the display driver, there is a chance that it could have an issue when it comes to docking. So we'll basically just get it all back together enough to test it on the dock. As long as it docks, then I'm absolutely fine to put it back together and call it done. So basically, to be able to make sure it's secure enough, we need to secure the port in place with these screws. And we also need to screw a couple of screws in, because if it comes to it where it's ready to go, then we're not going to be able to access these screws unless we take the card reader out. And let's get this screw in as well. Just add some fresh thermal paste there. Okay, and we are ready to start testing. So I'm not expecting this to turn on, and it did not. So what I'm going to do then is, first of all, I'm just going to plug it in and make sure it charges both ways. And it is booting. But it is dead, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I did expect it to be dead, to be honest. Right, so we've got 0.37 amps there, so that's a very dead battery. That's going to slowly increase, but what I want to do is just basically flip the charger around and make sure that it's going to charge both ways. And it is, so we're getting 0.35 amps now. Excellent. Right, let's just flip it around once more. And yeah, we are charging indeed. Right, so I'm going to put this onto the 15 volt charger and make sure that it's got some charge in it. It shouldn't take long for it to kick back into life on the 15 volt charger. In case you don't know, the 15 volt is just the official Nintendo Switch charger. So I'll pop it onto there, I'll get it charged up. I'm going to go grab a coffee. I'll be back in a jiffy.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
And we're back. Okay, so this is now turning on, which is absolutely great. So let's just plug in a charger and make sure it charges that side, which it does. And let's flip it around. Make sure it charges that side. And it does. Awesome. Okay, so that's accepting the charger, which is great. So let's just pop in a game card and make sure that it works. And it does. So let's do the rest of the tests. So I do have a set process here which I go through for testing the consoles. And if you're new to the channel, there's a hidden message inside that Wi-Fi password. And if you click on a little button down below, it'll allow you to do that. So just a little heads up there. There we go. Excellent. So that seems to be working fine on the internet. So let's get the controllers and sensors. Test input. Test touchscreen. And that was me that lifted my finger off that then. Doesn't appear to be any dead spots in the screen. That's absolutely great. Excellent. Okay, let's pop in some Joy-Cons. That one pairs. And that one pairs as well. Excellent. Okay, so Joy-Cons seem to be pairing absolutely fine. So the final thing to do is, well, let's get off there. And let's pop it onto the dock and make sure that it docks. And there we go. So docking absolutely fine. So everything on this appears to be working, which is absolutely fantastic. So that's pretty much it for this one. So all that's left to do is just to screw in the back plate and screw on the back panel, and this console will be ready to go. But for the purposes of this video, I'm going to leave it there. So let's just summarise on this then. So this was sent in because it had a charging issue, and upon closer inspection we could see that there was very visible damage to the charger port itself. So that's the charger port, and there was very visible damage to the charger port, but by replacing the charger port and also by replacing the P13 USB, I'm not sure where I've put that old chip, but by replacing P13 USB as well, we was able to get this console to charge and work properly again. So as you saw, there was a very visible hole in P13 USB, and that was a dead giveaway that we had a problem with it. And also the fact that the capacitor was shorted as well told us that we needed to replace it. But that's going to be it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. If you do have any comments or questions, leave them down in the comment section down below. I will always do my best to answer them. And if you want to organise your own repair, you can do so by getting in touch using the contact details in the video description. If you want to see more repair videos, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell notifications so that you're notified whenever I upload. And if you want to support the channel and you enjoy what I do, then you can become a channel member for as little as £1.99 per month. And all channel members get early access to all of my videos. But that's going to be it for this one. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, see you later. Bye for now.